This is Dan Schneider on this Dan Schneider video interview. The subject is white racial pathology. I initially was going to have a show with several guests, but it turned out that I will probably have a series of 3 or 4 shows on this topic with Black Americans. The first one up is Derrick Payne, the man before you, and he is an American businessman and communications consultant, and the conversation will begin in a moment. This is Dan Schneider. Derrick Payne is my guest. As I said, the topic of the show will be white racial pathology. In the year 2018, in which we are recording, racism is as abundant as ever in American history. And instead of taking the view that so many people and so many shows do about what does it feel like to be victimized by racism, I wanted to have or sort of flip the tables and have Black Americans talk about what they think goes on in the minds of white people in general or in particular. Derrick Payne is my guest. I will give him a couple of minutes to introduce himself. He owns a company called LMJ Creative Communication. So Derrick, if you could just give a little background about yourself before we get into the main subject.
Absolutely. Good day to everybody that's watching right now. My name is Derrick Payne. I have a lot of opinions and a lot to offer, and I hope that this conversation is peaceful and productive for everybody participating in it. I am 50 years old. I live in Dallas, Texas, where I work as a college professor, but also have a communications consulting business that came out of a 35-year career in mass media. LMJ Creative Communications has 7 partners who do workshops, presentations, seminars, all over the world, and we have successfully dealt with cross-cultural communication. We do mediation. We do communication with clarity on issues pertaining to almost any field of endeavor. The art of talking has been lost. The art of listening and learning seems to have gone bye-bye. So we are the centering force in all of it, not centering in a way that we dishonor the world that we live in by acting like things aren't like they are, but centering by there has to be somewhere to go for people to sit calmly, exchange information, and grow as a result. We're in the what are we going to do now business, and that's what I'm called to talk about today.
Yeah. That's exactly why I started this series. You are actually my 240th show, and I've always thought that the internet is the lowest common denominator, and YouTube tends to be the lowest common denominator. It's just nothing but bubble-headed celebrity bullshit, and I think people can talk intelligently and entertain or at least engage people to listen. So let me start off small and progress a little bit more. We're just now, the day before Independence Day here in 2018, we're recording this on 7/3/18, and about 3 or 4 days ago on Twitter, and I found you on Twitter, there was online this thing in northern Ohio, a young black boy who had started his own lawnmower service was mowing some people's lawns, and apparently he went about a foot over the property line of some people who were white, and instead of just going out and saying, "Oh, son, could you just make sure not to mow on my property," or something, these people didn't even confront the boy. They called the cops to come and tell the kid to go away. And I thought to myself, what the hell kind of an adult is so either scared or so mixed up? I mean, there was no violence. The kid is fine. There's no violence. But that you can't even talk to someone. What?
I mean, the kid was not outside with a property surveyor's set of equipment. It's something that I would imagine happens about 1,000 times a day in every city in America. He didn't destroy their property. He cut part of their grass. Thank you would have been appropriate in that case. As a kid who grew up cutting grass, which is, I mean, how long a list is that? What is this person's interaction now with others in that neighborhood? The goal, obviously, was to scare the kid. We've got to get out of this thing where we're calling the police like it's the front desk at a hotel. You know, I stay at a hotel.
Yeah.
I should be able to call the request and get 100% of my, bring me some towels, bring me some water. I don't know when the police became customer service.
Yeah. And you know the thing
So,
that I found odd was I saw this it was you know a typical little 2 or 3 minute news segment at the end of a news show in northern Ohio, I guess a Cleveland suburb or
mhm,
something, and the two anchor people were black and the reporter was a white woman, and I found it odd though that they didn't see, I mean, not that they had to see something sinister, but they were all just like, oh, you know, Tiffany, this is a funny kind of little, you know, human news story. And I thought, but this is a perfect emblem of what's wrong, I think, with society today, but in specific with the way most of white America approaches the other. And
right.
it's mostly black through history, but it could be Chinese, it could be Latino, it could be in recent years Muslim, it could
Yeah.
be gay.
It could be Muslims, it could be poor people
Yeah,
in general.
yeah,
I, and since this is the same part of the country where Tamir Rice is buried, I don't think it's funny.
yeah,
I don't see a damn thing funny about calling the police on a 12-year-old kid who's clearly not creating any problems for you. Tamir Rice was murdered 2 seconds after a policeman got out of the car in complete violation of every police protocol that I know.
yeah,
You don't drive up to somebody that you think is a threat.
yeah,
But I just, as a parent of a 12-year-old African American boy, shit ain't funny.
yeah,
It's not, it's not a little bit funny. I was at the African American Museum of History and Culture. They have an exhibit on Sandra Bland, and they have an exhibit, concurrent exhibit, about having the talk with your kid.
yeah,
And after I stopped crying, because you realize that there's hundreds of families, you put it into that context. Okay, when it's you, it's not so cute. Like, I really can't stand by passively and just say this is the way that it is and this is the way that it's going to be. And no disrespect to people that have a really complicated job to do. But if they want to learn how to communicate, myself and several other business people can help them develop that skill. Because what we're not going to do is have more rallies and funerals.
You said that you're 50 years old. How old were you? 7, 8, 12 when you first got into your mind living, and I'm assuming you grew up in America, where you
Mm-hmm.
said that, Mom, why do people not like me because my skin is brown? Was there like a moment? I mean, I'm not saying that the a
Mm-hmm.
big white bully said, "Let's kill that nigger." I'm
Right.
thinking it could have been just an offhand comment from a teacher or something
Mm-hmm.
where something switched on. What do you remember that moment?
Well, it's an interesting thing. At 50, I grew up in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
1954, public schools were integrated with all delivery speed. In St. Louis, that took place in 1976.
Mm,
I was in the fourth grade. I was hand chosen to integrate public schools in St. Louis. I ain't that old,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And to say that I've had that experience of literally being one of the Ruby Bridges of my generation of walking to the bus stop, I'm the first person in my family to go to an integrated school. I hate that,
yeah,
but it's the truth. I was sent, I won't say I attended, I was sent to a high school that had 12 African Americans in the building. And yeah, the pushback was immediate. I was always a good student and a polite kid because that's what was built into me. And when I got to that high school, I realized very, very quickly that none of that mattered. Being a good student and a polite kid, you were still seen as a place taker,
yeah,
right? You're here, so somebody that could have been here isn't here. I was treated as a problem. I had a advisor, a counselor in the ninth grade that called my mom every few weeks, suggesting other schools that I could go to because I wasn't that smart and I was going to make it. I mean, that was his assessment without ever really interacting with me. His job was to drive out black students. Now, I
yeah.
would say black and brown students, except there was only one Hispanic kid in the building,
Mhm.
you
I'm
know.
I'm a few years older than you. I'm 53, and I
Hmm.
remember, and I've often tried to understand. For example, I grew up in New York City. If you couldn't tell by my accent, and we were
Right.
working class Democrats. My dad uh, came from a European social liberal background, and I would always leave family gatherings because he would be arguing with what were called Wall Street Republicans, who today are
Hmm.
very tame, but back then they would call Dr. King Dr. Coon, or or and I remember in 1981 during the Atlanta child murders, there were yellow ribbons
Hmm.
all around the school. I went to a typical urban inner city
Hmm.
prison school kind of thing, and I remember there were white kids on one bus, Hispanics on another bus, black kids on another bus. There were three gangs of the three main groups, and
Hmm.
there were police escorts because to a small degree the Hispanic kids would taunt the black kids, but the white kids would be merciless, because at that time they thought it was not the black guy, I forget his name, who eventually was charged with the crimes, but they
Wayne
thought,
Williams.
yeah, Wayne Williams, but they thought it
Mhm.
was the Ku Klux Klan
Right.
that was killing people. And I just remember thinking, okay, this is 800 miles from New York or whatever it is. Some people you don't know are getting killed. And yet there was this kind of sadistic glee in a lot of these kids who
Hmm.
clearly weren't that smart, but they had to have learned this somewhere, because I know when I grew up, if I saw an old lady trip or something, I had empathy. These kids had been desensitized. What
Yeah.
do you think it is in white culture, as an outsider, because you're just of the color of your skin?
Hmm.
Have you ever talked with people? What the fuck is wrong with a lot of white people? Because a lot of these people are good, decent, tax-paying citizens. They don't
Right.
go around. They're not serial killers or pedophiles or whatnot. But on
Right.
this one thing, there's like a mental miswiring.
Yeah, there is a multi-generational, probably to the point that it's embedded pretty good. But there is a multi-generational challenge of when I take, if you fought somebody and you've been beating them pretty good, and you have your foot on their throat, the real fear is when I take my foot off of his throat,
Yeah,
based on what I've done to him in the past, this guy's going to jump up and beat the smoke out of him.
yeah,
So it's that taking the foot, you let me go, I'll let you go. You let me go, I'll let you go. Well, the first person that lets go is going to catch it really good,
yeah,
right? So it's a real fear because of the weight of history that this is going to come back around. And I think that we saw that over the 8 years of the Obama administration, that there was this complete fear that payback is coming.
yeah,
And of course, it didn't come. Mr. President Obama, way too gracious, way too empathetic, way too civil, way too well trained to come back at people's throats. Um, I'm fascinated that number 45, I don't like saying his name, it's like calling the boogeyman. Um, but number 45 has done every single thing that this group, large group, 63 million strong, assumed that Black Americans would do if we ever got a hold of the presidency.
yeah.
They assumed that President Obama would make a bunch of incompetent appointments,
Mm.
that he would tear up the economy, that he would disregard every rule, that he would embarrass the country on a world stage. They just assumed that
Yeah.
he would do all of that. And so I didn't know that the level of hatred was so deep that you would actually go get somebody that is clearly unqualified for the job that you put him in,
Yeah.
who doesn't give a damn about even trying to get people around him to help him do it better, and to actually let him loose. It would be like if you got a drunken gorilla and let him loose in your living room to prove a point.
Yeah.
I
Let me
mean,
just let, let,
we're proving a point here.
let me just ask you something about Obama, because I'm a social liberal, and I voted
Hmm.
for Obama twice. Before that, I voted for Ralph Nader 3 times. I voted for Jill Stein in the last election.
Hmm.
Now, I one of the things, my grievances against Obama is I think he was too polite. There's a
Yeah.
sense that I think that, well, for example, I've always been big on unions. We've seen the way both Bush and now Trump use executive orders. Why didn't Obama just close
Yeah.
fucking Gitmo? Why didn't
Yeah.
he do card check? It's like, do you think he was scared that if I'm not Mr. Nice Negro, the Bill Cosby before the rape
Hmm.
accusations, uh, that people are going to get uh, white people are going to get too antsy. They're going to get antsy anyway. Just
Right.
go in there and do. Don't worry about 8 years. In 4 years, do as much as you can.
Yeah. The last 2 years of that administration should have been spent running roughshod over civility and niceness and politeness and playing along. You let them have a seat on the Supreme Court because I would have a press conference every day yelling, "This is bullshit,"
Yeah.
until the majority of the world heard my side. Obviously, I would have played things different, but I can honestly say that as somebody that has been the official Negro,
Yeah.
the first and the only, and knowing there's nobody really to come and get you because you're the first one ever been here. So you can't really expect the cavalry to come riding over the hill. Yeah, there is a implicit and inherent fear of letting them have you. But that being said, legitimate critique that, the last 2 years you can't be president anymore. Yeah, I would have had the policies and implementations in place expecting the backlash
Yeah.
that we've gotten since November 16th. We have gotten, we had no idea that the people were this petty. Well, now we know.
Yeah.
You know,
Let me
now we know.
let me ask you something, and it
Sure.
goes back to an email that I sent, and I wanted to talk. I mean, it's easy to point to a Trump. It's easy to point to dummies who wear
Mhm.
white hoods or skinheads or have swastikas, but I've often thought that the entrenched bigotry and racism that is undercover is far worse in the sense because if someone's wearing a hood, oh, there's trouble. And I gave the example in an email that I sent to you and a fellow who I'm going to probably end up interviewing at another time about a friend of mine. And let me just recap it. A friend of mine who's a Democrat and a social liberal around the turn of the century had asked me if I was attracted to black women. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he started talking about black women. And I said, "Well, it depends on the woman." And he said he wasn't. I said, "Wait a minute. Uh, if you're telling me if you came home and you're not attached and Halle Berry's laying naked in the bed asking you to make love to her, you wouldn't." He said, "Oh, well, of course, that's Halle Berry." And when I asked him, "Then what did you mean about that?" He started describing his idea of a black female, and it turned out to be Aunt Jemima. And I said, "You're taught," and he didn't. And this is an educated guy with 2 degrees in
Mhm.
science, and yet in his mind, all black women were of one vein, sort of, and
Sure.
and he would support all kinds of integration. He would support all kinds of, but in his mind there was this bizarre little curlicue. Do you think that kind of thing is the bigger problem than just the Neanderthals who are out there,
Right.
raging?
Well, I think that numerically, the people that never got the message that their way of life in terms of white supremacy is over. I think the people that didn't get that message and they're still putting on the pointy hats and going to Klan meetings, they're really a powerless, ineffectual group.
Yeah,
It's not, it's the Wizard of Oz. It's smoke and mirrors, but it's a little pitiful man behind the curtain
yeah,
making a lot of noise. I think that if you numerically look at it, the much more challenging issue is how do we get people to change their minds if they don't have any different experiences. A King quote: "The Negro's great stumbling block to freedom is the white moderate who constantly says, 'I agree with you in goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods.'" And those people that paternalistically believe they can set the timetable for another person's freedom. It's not time yet. You gotta wait. Wow, those people are the ones that are terrified, and there's enough of them that they can terrify the others, and that's where the work needs to be done.
continuing on with Derrick Payne.
Peace.
Let me just talk a little bit about these the recent spate of what I call sort of hunting season on black men.
Wow.
This has always been. I mean, obviously. I know when I was a kid in the 70s, though, it used to be, on page 47 in maybe the local community section of the newspaper, and it would be a day or two. Now we have social media and things are 24/7. I do think, you know, that probably there are less actual incidents now than there were in the 1960s or the 50s. It's just they're more reported in detail, which is a good thing. People with the cell phone cameras and whatnot that will catch. There was a kid shot just running away from a car because I think he and two other people were stopped simply because there was a report that black kids had done something in the neighborhood. This was, again, about a week or so ago. Do you think that, because the media often gets blamed, I think the media does a lot of stupid shit, but do you think that the media sometimes gets unfairly blamed for some of these things? Like I said, because instead of being on page 47 for 1 or 2 days in the local newspaper section, things are played now out 24/7. Do you think that's a positive?
Um, I think that it's something that we can't fix. I mean, I started working in the media in 1985, 84. I was 16 years old. And so I learned really quickly that media outlets are businesses and that there is somebody that sits in the newsroom and determines what's news. The owner of the newspaper would literally come in and his niece was in a beauty pageant and that would have to go on page one. It didn't matter if anybody cared about it. It's a business, and when you own a business, you can kind of do what you want. I think that what's changed in the last 35 years is who has access to that driver's seat. And now that people have Twitter and Facebook and that people have the ability to go directly to other people to post independent content, and that people have grown up in an era where they seek that content on, well, independent of what comes on their news, I think that we see some changes with that. I think that there are a lot of people, it scares me that there are people that get their information from Facebook because it's unfiltered, which means that you can get wrong. But I've learned that every time somebody starts a conversation with, "Hey, I saw on Facebook," I turn my ears off.
Yeah.
It's like, I go deaf for a few minutes until you stop talking because, I think of a lot of social media as the repository of stupid people.
Yeah.
YouTube can be dummy headquarters. Not a word of truth in it, but hey, I can put it out here.
Yeah, I'm the same way when people say that they read it on Wikipedia, so it must be true.
I have a generation of college students that I'm teaching now that I have to physically teach. Do not Google anything. You're making a presentation in college and you use a cleverly photoshopped picture of Tupac shaking hands with Martin Luther King. Maybe you think this is, well, see, he was a great dude, because you're talking to somebody that knows better. So yeah, you have to, I can make a Wikipedia. One time I made a Wikipedia entry that I had won the Wimbledon tennis tournament just to prove a point. There is no editor, there is no author.
Yeah.
Just call it up. I won Wimbledon. See, it's on Wikipedia. Therefore, I'm right. Well, you gotta be careful out there. So we're giving a lot of morons a microphone. And surprised that their voices are carrying.
Let me turn to a little bit less out there aspect of what I would call the racial pathology, especially for white people, and that's sports. Recently, LeBron James, who's widely regarded as the best basketball player right now, signed with the LA Lakers, and it was big news. And in the same city, Los Angeles, there's a great baseball player named Mike Trout. And I've always found it interesting that the way great athletes are spoken of. LeBron James is one of the few really great black athletes that's called that's said to have been a hard worker and whatnot. But we always get the thing that he's intelligent. And that's added there, not because he's not intelligent, but because the assumption is that he wouldn't be. So we have to say he's also intelligent. And in the reverse, the pathology has gotten so bad, there's the assumption that white athletes are somehow not great athletes. And I look at Mike Trout. Mike Trout is as easily the best baseball player as LeBron is easily the best basketball player. But Mike Trout works hard.
Yeah.
Larry Bird wasn't a great athlete. He worked hard, but Michael Jordan was gifted.
Yeah, there's people that are nutritionists and built a gym in their house, but somehow they're not working hard. I mean, I think that, and this again is as a sports historian, you want to believe that you have some advantage even when you're physically seeing that you don't. Oh my gosh, they're already big and smart. was big and strong.
Yeah.
What if they hit the gym 10 hours a day?
Yeah.
Then what? Then how are we going to get jobs? I find a lot of the dialogue and the outcry that has come up in the last few years about athletes and, they're forming super teams. Well, what were the Celtics in the 60s?
Yeah.
What were the Celtics in the late? When did we not have that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's maddening if you really put that amount of energy into it. The only difference is that instead of the owners making decisions about which players are on the team,
Yeah.
the players are making decisions about who's going to be on which team.
Yeah.
And there's no way to stop that. So of course the game is corrupt. Nobody wants to watch that anymore. But it's the difference in our parents having union jobs and pretty much having one option when they went to work in a town, and
Yeah.
that was it, and sticking with that job. We're 50 years old. We're not going to retire. Nobody our age has worked 35 years at the same company and gets a gold watch and the cake in the break room. That economic paradigm doesn't exist anymore. So you got to do the best you can. Yeah, if somebody calls and says, hey, we'll pay you $20,000 a year more to do the same thing, you've just hired an employee. Derrick Payne at yahoo.com. You've just hired an employee, and nobody should fault me for that. It's an open market. I learned a long time ago. I work for myself. I sell my time to my employer. So I got to be loyal to me, because these people will push you out the door in a heartbeat. By the same token, if my employer could find somebody that can do somewhat close to what I could do for $20,000 a year less, I don't expect any loyalty. They will cook up a reason to get rid of me. Well, you were 18 seconds late that one day 7 years ago. And and I've seen it done, and I've been on both sides of it. And so my granddad, God bless the dead, said that if you're a black man in America, you need a job and a hustle.
Yeah.
Right? So I have a professional job, but I also own a company.
Yeah.
But you better know how to do taxes or fix cars or paint or do something, because you need to put food in your refrigerator. And you can't wait for that to come for anybody else. And that's just the economic reality of 2018. Nobody should be loyal.
And
you gotta love yourself and your family. That's where it starts and ends.
Yeah, and then a couple of years ago, or maybe just the last season, it started in the NFL with Colin Kaepernick and
God bless him.
and the kneeling for the anthem. Now, I'm an American citizen, but I'm not a nationalist in the sense that my country do or die. And it goes back to the bicentennial. I remember in sixth grade, I was outside, and we were doing the hand over the heart for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I saw this little black girl, and her name was Sonia, and she was a black Muslim, not Malcolm X black Muslim, and I remember I asked her, why are you crying? Because she wasn't doing it. And she said, well, it was against her religion to have false idols. So she couldn't pray to the flag. And I said, that's interesting. And the more I thought about it, whenever I've gone to sporting events, and a few times when I was living in New York, I'd go to Shea Stadium. People, would get angry at me not standing up. I'd say, no, what am I? I'm not a zombie. I'm not a monkey that you can just throw a peanut and I'm going to do it. If that doesn't mean that I'm anti-American. This is the essence of being an American. And yet, Colin Kaepernick, now granted, he made 25, 30 million in his career. So, I mean, this isn't like black men being shot for no reason, but it's still something that is so obviously wrong. And this stuff, it has nothing to do with race. Bullshit.
Right. I mean, nobody's buying that.
Yeah. And the thing is, what do you, forget Trump, but why do you think it's so easy to gull so many of these people who are mostly white that just fall into line with this and don't see that people shed their blood so that people could say, no, I'm not going to be like everyone else. That's the essence, supposedly, of being an American.
All this time, we thought it was an option. We thought it was a choice. We didn't know it was required. I don't know what you say to the millions of Jehovah's Witnesses who have never stood up for a flag and saluted a flag, but they're not going. They haven't done it, and they're not going to do it. So I don't know why this one person who had a conversation with somebody about his values and beliefs, and that person who was a Army veteran suggested taking a knee as a way And I mean, if we stand up, you got a problem. If we sit down, you got a problem. If we kneel, you got a problem.
Yeah.
If we don't say anything, you want us to say something. When we say what we want to say, you want us to shut up. And at the end of it, we get shot, and then you're quiet.
Yeah.
I'm not following the logic there. Um, History has a way of showing those people to be right. If going all the way back to Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the '68 Olympics, well, how'd that work out for us? If you're going all the way back to Kurt Flood saying, "I'm going to play baseball where I want to play, just like anybody else that has a job." If I, fix cars and I want to move to Ohio and fix cars, there's not really anybody that can stop me from doing that. All those things are really, really important. So you really want to make sure that Colin Kaepernick and those people who share his convictions and courage are remembered at the time and in the future for what they did. Colin Kaepernick made $25 million playing football. It wasn't a gift certificate. It wasn't, he put his life on the line. I played that game. You shorten your life. You take risks. You can break your neck on any play. You took those risks in exchange for a salary. And people say that because you take the salary, then you can't have a heart in your chest and a brain in your head afterwards. And okay, convince somebody else. It's not working on me.
Yeah. Let me talk about police brutality in
Sure.
general, and then regarding black people specifically. I grew up in New York City in what could be termed the Serpico era. Al Pacino, the famous film on the New York cop, and I grew up. I mean, there were cops. I remember as a little kid. Me and a friend of mine, the cops did some stuff that I'm not going to get into, but they would always pick on poor people. And you had mentioned earlier just about poor people. And I always have seen racism in America as a subset of classism, and
Sure.
I think that one of the things that happens is, quote unquote, white trash is so easily gulled and manipulated by the people that we call the 1%, is that, well, you're one step removed from them darkies, and
Right.
if you don't bow to us, you're going to be just like them. Do you think there's
Right.
any of this kind of internecine racial politics within white social classes that gets these people who should be natural allies to
Right.
other oppressed peoples? The people, whether it's Appalachia
Yeah.
or urban poor whites.
Yeah. Public school money at work. They're voting against their own self-interest.
Yeah.
You have people, and it's not in rural Kentucky, it's in the city in Dallas, who are driving around in government-funded scooters and living, in a way where they get, income tax credits for home ownership, which was prohibited to African Americans, and they get all of these advantages. And now they're mad that other people might get some of the same advantages they've gotten. Part of it is the perception that they didn't get any advantages that comes with being white.
Yeah.
I should have the best of everything,
Right.
but we have demonstrably shown that being black in America means that you get less of everything good and more of everything bad, and the people that are asking questions about it are shunned. And I mean, you talk about finances, education, healthcare, police responsiveness. I cannot call the police and say there's a little girl selling bottled water in front of the house and she doesn't have a permit. She's trying to raise money to help her family go to Disneyland, but I want you to come lock her up. I can't make that call. I don't care where I'm at on the economic or social spectrum. I don't get to do that.
Yeah.
Right. I don't get to pick out people barbecuing in the park and call the police and say, hey, come get these guys out of here. They're barbecuing in the park. I mean,
Yeah.
They're just privileges that are given. As long as your skin is your complexion is correct, you always have an army on your side that answers 911 every time you call.
And for people who don't know, there was an internet meme a month or two ago. This white woman had called on a couple of guys, I think it was in Oakland, who were barbecuing
Right.
at a lakeside.
Of
or
all
something.
places.
Yeah, and the thing is, didn't she turn out to be a college professor? Or something?
Yes. She was a Stanford graduate and was working as a professor somewhere else. And why you were so offended by somebody barbecuing in the park, Find a park anywhere in America right now today, and let's see who's, are we the only people that cook out in the park? Hell,
Yeah.
the grill's built into the ground. What did you think it was there for? What were you supposed to do?
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Now I talked about what's termed as white trash and what their motivation and how they could be manipulated. But I was just thinking just a couple of days ago, what would motivate the rich elite, that 1% who are white? And I think that there's probably somewhere deep in the recesses of the minds of people like that, they fear because they know that they're rich and privileged through no fault of their own, i.e., I did nothing to get this, so it could
Right.
just as easily evaporate. Do you think that's
Yeah.
a part of the reason why white people, especially, it seems almost to me that the very bottom of the social scale in white America has a lot of fear because, as I said, you might fall down to the darkies level, but the top has fear too because they know they didn't earn anything. The middle class has some fear, but not as much as the extremes.
Right.
Does
A
that
lot of
jive with
that
you?
is we're in a magic number generation. Here's what I mean by that, Dan. The last report that I saw, which was about 4 days ago, is that the death rate for white Americans is exceeding the birth rate for the first time. Folks are dying faster than they're being born.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, other societies don't have that issue.
Yeah.
The number one English-speaking country in the world is now China.
Yeah.
There are more people in China that speak English than there are in any other country in the world. Well, that leads back to the big C, competition.
Yeah.
For years, you had all these really smart people, and okay, wow, we don't have to compete for jobs and resources with them because they don't speak English. That's no longer the case. There are more kids in India that are taking AP and honors courses than there are kids in school in America.
Yeah.
That scares some people. It doesn't scare me, bring them.
Yeah.
But that scares the hell out of some people.
And
they got more honors kids
yeah.
than we got kids.
Yeah. And the thing is too, as industrialized nations get more prosperous, the birth rates do, which is a good thing because you don't want to have too many people. But I think there's that barbarians at the gate thing that we see. Oh, in Darfur, there's fields of brown skin out there. If you look in India, there are fields of brown people out there. If you look in South America, there in Brazil, there's all of these people that are from quote unquote third world nations, or as our number 45, as you call them, shithole nations, and they're going to be more of them than quote unquote us.
And in the history of the world, whoever had the most numbers got the most stuff. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's just the way that it's worked in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Well, apparently we're going to have to hand off. Right? That scares some people because sooner or later we got to hand off. I mean, we can have all the election fraud we want. If there are more of us than there are of you, we're going to win every election. Wow, we better start tricking up these elections and throwing people off the election rolls. We're going to be the dominant group, so we're going to apportion more towards black and brown people because there's more of them, so they get the big piece of the chicken, right? Yeah. Now you get the small piece and we get the big piece. Right. Wait a minute, let's start scaring these people from coming over here and getting it back. And all you're doing is pushing it back a few years. That's all you're doing. The water coming in is inevitable. All you can do is keep it from getting to your feet as fast as it gets to your feet. But it's already coming. This was written. The first will be the last, not last will be the first. The dominant country in the world. Most biggest education, baddest military, highest standard of living. People live longer and are healthier and happier. Their money was the money that you measured your money against. How many of this country's dollars can I get with one of my dollars? The standard in 1900 was England. And they had their run, and it's not like that anymore. And the United States surges with the greatest generation in the 40s and the 50s. And those people are going to the cemetery by the truckload.
Yeah.
So now what? Oh my, yeah, yeah. Fear is an amazing thing, and there are some people that are scared that've never been scared.
Yeah,
You know, I am a third generation pushbacker. I'm a
yeah,
third generation activist. I mean, my great grandparents were activists, my grandparents, my parents, me, and now, so this is a family business. We ain't going nowhere, but we're not scared. What Malcolm say? It ain't like we never seen blood before. There's some people that are dug in and ready to wrestle this thing and give us what you got, because round two is after round one, and round three is after round two, and round four is it's like a Rocky movie.
yeah.
You know, yeah,
Uh,
you punched us real, real good, but we're still getting off the stool.
do you think I had mentioned sports earlier, and
Hmm.
black people have become acceptable as celebrities, whether they're in entertainment or sports or whatnot. But I've always thought that just as with the argument about one race or one racial group being better in sports or whatnot being a load of shit. It's just black people have had easier access to economic security via sports and entertainment. Do you think that that's a conscious choice by? I wouldn't say it's an active plan like the Illuminati, but that there's a social with Robert Moses when he fractured communities and it
Hmm.
went around the country in the 20s and 30s,
Sure.
because a lot of people don't realize 100 years ago there was a thriving black middle class that was then fractured by people like Robert Moses who broke up neighborhoods, and there was a great basically theft of money that impoverished the succeeding generations. But
Sure.
do you think that there's either a subconscious or a conscious effort to push black people into entertainment and sports rather than as doctors or lawyers or historians or these more respectable things, because we can still have that preserved for ourselves? We don't care if they
Sure.
want to go out there and beat the shit out of each other with boxing gloves or helmets and footballs.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about contemporary sports is the amount of money that is being generated by athletes is now at the point that a smart athlete can legitimately think about owning a team after they're done playing.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case. I mean,
Derek
if you look at
Jeter, Michael
athletes in the
Jordan.
exactly, if you looked at athletes in the 70s and 80s, those guys had jobs in the off season,
Yeah.
selling cars and selling insurance. John Havlicek quit the Celtics because he was making more money selling insurance than he was playing for the Celtics. Well, now you're talking about an athlete having the ability to generate, 30, $40 million at a season and 100 million, 200 million conservatively in a career. Wow, it's going to be kind of hard to get those guys away from the bargaining table when it's time to buy and sell teams, or when it's time to do something different. I think there's an awakening that comes with, again, a fear. I've been to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black Wall Street existed, and invite people to research that. Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Before the
1920s,
riot.
before the flyover bombing,
Yeah.
had the wealthiest black community in America. There were doctors, lawyers, engineers. African Americans bought their own bus company. They had public transportation. They had, churches. They had their own schools. There were African American housewives who would fly to Paris. There were 7 people that had private planes, and their wives would fly to Paris and go shopping on private planes. I don't know anybody that's living like that right now. So, the fact that this was happening in 1920, but again, that rage that comes from that, if you're a white American with a penny, a African American with a nickel is the enemy.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to fight the guy with a dollar. Your real challenge is you'd have a nickel if it wasn't for this guy. And so you pit those groups against each other, and the people on top win. I don't really care about LeBron James making $30 million, because he's getting a paycheck for $30 million from somebody who's making if you can
Yeah.
afford to pay your employees $30 million, what's your cut of the pie like?
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
You know,
let me talk about entertainment, because one of the things I grew up as a kid, and I remember the 1970s, which I think was the real golden age of television. And I
hmm
remember people talk about family dramas, and you had the Waltons, the Little House on the Prairie, but you only had black sitcoms, Good Times, which the first
yeah,
year with John Amos, I thought was a really had the potential to
hmm
be a really great show and whatnot. But we never have had in the 40 plus years since. any family dramas that dealt with black people. Black people, if there have been
Mhm.
dramas, it's always been some action show or something, but there's never been where black people were normalized in the eyes of white America, meaning that they had bills to pay, that they had a mortgage, that
Yeah.
Junior got his girlfriend pregnant, that the daughter is going off to college or whatnot.
Mhm.
Do you think that and even if you look at like quote unquote black movie directors, it's usually
Comedies
comedies,
or
it's usually what? Why is there not a serious, do you think, artistic take on black life? Yes, you had some plays, August
Mhm.
Wilson and whatnot, but
Yes.
other than that, uh, where are people that are doing things that depict black life as just like white life or Hispanic?
Yeah. Well, I think that the answer to that is in the fact that where are the black-owned TV stations? There aren't any. The black-owned networks. The BET is not black-owned. When if you the winner tells the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
If you and I get into a fight, whoever won the fight gets to tell the official version of the fight in the future.
yeah,
And so we see that people have not relinquished control of media outlets. Nobody's giving away ABC or CBS or NBC. I don't even know what it would cost to buy a broadcast network.
yeah,
It's got to be hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars.
yeah.
And so, because of that, you can set this up to institutionalize the behavior and make sure that your grandchildren are in a place to run an ABC or a CBS or a CNN in a way that nobody else is ever going to be able to. Even when there were black-owned minority-owned media outlets, they did not push the envelope in terms of creativity. The sadness of a BET not having weekly dramas about Black American life and culture. And if they were, I always look at who writes the show, who directs the show, who edits the show, because those people, who are the showrunners, because those people have a lot more power and jurisdiction over the entertainment. There's always been blips, there's always been aberrations, there's always been some show that people can say, yeah, well, what about Julia? Well, what about, this show or that show? But the reality is, in terms of mainstream programming, we don't get to make a mistake. We don't get a lousy show about just regular everyday people. There is no black version of that has sustenance without it going through a filter of this is what we think your life is like.
Do you think it would take someone like an Oprah Winfrey to buy a network if she could to that there could be some kind of change?
I think that the game is not to buy a network, it's to build a network.
Yeah,
Because if you buy a network, you've already got an existing business model that you're going into. There's a difference between buying a McDonald's and opening a hamburger stand.
yeah,
You know, you're not locked into McDonald's recipes. You're not locked into McDonald's advertisers. You're not locked into McDonald's paradigms and imitating McDonald's with a different face behind the wheel. You are creating from the ground up what that community needs. And so I think it's got to come from the ground up.
yeah.
And the great thing is, you have people that are, rather than going through a Hollywood movie system, realizing that you can shoot a Hollywood movie on your iPhone 8,
Yeah.
edit it in your living room. And if you could crack the movie distribution world, you could actually put the images out there that you want. But there's a whole generation of people behind you and me that are not making demo tapes and sending them to the record companies. They're releasing independent content on cell phone labels. They are not going to follow the paradigm of, okay, you get a bit part in local theater and then you work your way up, and after 35 years you're now a respected actor with a Sidney Poitier role in a movie. No, they're coming out straight to the top.
Yeah.
And so, wow, it's this group behind us, and it's part of that fear level. We can't control them. We
But
can't even influence
But when you talk about the difference between a McDonald's and a hamburger stand, I work in retail, and the thing
them.
is that Coke and Pepsi dominate not because they're the best products, but because they basically graft their way to the top. And
Yeah,
so
they,
if you
they
could
don't
buy,
let anybody
yeah,
else in.
and if you could buy a network though, you're already halfway there. Whereas if you're building it piecemeal, there's a good chance that you're going to get shut out of the game. And
Sure. But what we've learned is that advertising has changed because people don't watch TV the way they used to. People put a show on their DVR, they only watch the show that they want. When you and I were growing up, we had three, maybe four TV channels. And if you missed the show, you had to wait till the next summer to watch it.
Yeah.
And, there was no, there was literally three or four things that you could decide to watch at any time. And now people have three or four HBOs. There's thousands of channels that you could watch. But wow, if I were to put a show together, I'd want it on Netflix. So it's going to see a lot more people than if I put it on ABC, right? People are going to watch it on their phone at the bus stop. People are going to take the content with them when they go on vacation for a week. There's a whole different approach to it. I spent a lot of time working in the music industry, and it's fascinating. We thought people would always buy physical CDs. We just thought they would. But, they'd buy an album, they'd buy the CD. My son has never bought a CD, ever. Download it, stream it. Wow. So, wow, the artists are going straight to, we used to, and I don't know if you're me, but I used to go to Best Buy on Tuesdays, and I couldn't wait for the new stuff to come out on Tuesdays. And now if I want to see a movie, Best Buy, I don't even think they have a CD section in the store anymore. There's no reason to go to Target and buy a DVD. In the time it would take you to get to Target in your car, you could stream the whole thing in your living room.
Yeah.
You can watch TV on your toilet. You don't have to wait till the show comes on. Just watch it where you're at. Fascinating stuff.
Let me get back and bring the conversation back though to sort of one-on-one sort of personal reactions between Black Americans and white Americans. I'm someone who's a people watcher, so if I'm in a restaurant or something, and my wife and I are writers, and I tell this to young writers who write me, I said, there are stories all around. Just look at people. If you listen to their conversations, why are they talking about that? How did they meet and whatnot? And I've always found it interesting when I've seen or been somewhere, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's anywhere else, and it's mostly white crowd, and then someone different, especially if it's a black person, walks into the room, and the voice is lower, the eyes lower, or they get tighter, the lips curl up, and I've always found it interesting. I'm wondering to myself, what is that person, meaning the white people, what are they thinking? And I'm wondering, as a black person, have you noticed that yourself? And have you gotten to a point where you don't give a shit what they're thinking? Or do you still sort of play inner psychologist and say, is that person thinking that they'd like to shoot me? Are they thinking that I'm going to rape them? Are they thinking that I'm going to run off with their purse? What enters into you as just Derrick Payne, black American male, when you, because certainly you had to see that kind of thing I just described.
Sure. And I mean, as a armchair psychologist, one of my fun things to do is to go, hey, what's this guy's deal? And I can craft, as a writer, like you said, I can craft the entire story of your life. When you walk by me one time, this guy, it's something that you do as a creative person for fun. It's something that you do as a reach. You want to make sure that as much as possible that you keep that third eye creatively open. You don't take it seriously, but then at a certain point you realize people are doing this about me and they're making decisions based on that. I don't look like where I'm from or what I've been through. I may have several college degrees and live in the suburbs, but this was not my starting point. And there is no indicators, if you look at my early life, that pointed to me winding up here. So, wow, part of the creativity is, do you see the entire journey or do you just see the right now part of the journey?
Yeah.
Because if you just met me last month, you're getting a whole different person than if you had met me in, 1982.
Yeah.
Whole different dude exists in front of you. So you really want to make sure as much as possible that you are tuned into all the pieces of who a person is. And I do find it difficult, candidly, to give everybody an open chance. And I know that other people do the same thing, that they find it difficult to just across the board decide that, hey, this is just a regular, normal guy.
Yeah.
You kind of have to feel people out,
Yeah, I've often, when I've gotten to know people, meaning other white people, and I might have seen some behavior or whatnot, like I said, I think white racial pathology, as I guess I would call it clinically, isn't necessarily someone who's an evil person. I just think there's something that's wrong. It's wrong conditioning. But I've asked people, I said, okay, so I saw that this thing happened. I saw you look at someone that way, a black person walked in, and I said, let me just ask a question. Do you think that that person urinates blackly? Do you think that that
Right.
person, when they fart, their farts are different because they're black? Do you think that that person blows their nose blackly? And I could say this homosexually or Jewishly or Muslimly, but since other than Native Americans, blacks would have the biggest claim to be uh, bigoted, biased against in this country. And they people just white people that I've asked this just sort of spaz out, and it's almost as if it's a game that they have been conditioned to, Pavlovianly, and when you confront them, they have no real answers, but
Right.
they can't help themselves, even if they are a basically good person, like my well-educated friend who couldn't distinguish between Halle Berry and his idea of a black woman.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just sort of wrap things up then. Let me just
Cool.
ask you then about LMJ. You talked about uh, fostering communication and whatnot. Do you deal
Hmm.
actively with social or political issues, or is it more just business to business?
I deal actively with social and political issues because that's who I am. I mean, I am part of a community that needs me. I'm standing on the shoulders of people that sacrificed so I could stand. And now I have younger people standing on my shoulders. We push and promote excellence in every way. But certainly, if you're, and I try to frame it that way, if you're not comfortable doing business with a company that is going to deal with righteousness, with progressive causes, then that's fine. Please spend your money somewhere else because I'm not going to go back and forth with you. The good thing about owning a company is I don't need to beg anybody. You know, I rarely actively seek out more business. I did, for LMJ came about because for 20 years easily, people would always ask, well, can you come and talk to the kids at the rec center? Well, can you come and speak at the church? Can you come and talk at our school? Can you be our graduation speaker? Can you talk to my nephew? He's heading the wrong way. And I did it without blinking. Then I got into a collegiate mode and I realized that my college was paying people not a small amount of money to come in and doing stuff that I would do all the work in between the paid speakers. We're going to bring in this guy, we're going to bring in this woman, and she's a nationally renowned speaker. And they would come and they would get $7,500 for 30 minutes, and then they leave, and then I'd have to do all of the cleanup work in between those presents. 3 months later, we've got this person coming in. But that 3 months in between presenters I was the one on Front Street dealing with all of the challenges and issues of day-to-day management. So I said, well, wait a minute, how come I'm not the consultant going out and getting the $7,500 rate
Yeah.
for a 1 hour workshop
Yeah.
and then going back home to a regular job? So I simply institutionalize what I'm doing. And I don't do it to make money. I do it to have resources to be of support and help to the communities that need me. I because it's not what I need to do to keep the lights on in my house, I can comfortably say, well, okay, I'm going to use this money to make a difference in the lives of people that are counting on me. If that's scholarships, if that's helping the homeless, if that's helping disabled veterans, if that's working with the young people to help them see a better way of doing that. If it's, recently it's become supporting young athletes and getting SAT and ACT scores that they can use to earn a scholarship. The school's not necessarily investing in that. You could break your neck playing high school football and nobody will ever know you are alive. Hey, if you really want to pursue this thing, how about you get some great ACT and SAT scores and then you can write the check. If you got to play soccer anyway, play soccer at one of these top institutions, right?
Yeah.
And return to your community with a commitment to get somebody else over the wall. Well, if I help you with the SAT, that may be the most help I can do. Your school's going to fill up a stadium and clap at your abilities. But they don't really care if you go to the next level. So, part of what LMJ does, without charge, is assisting student athletes in growing and getting to the next level. I can afford to do that because I'll charge a corporation X amount of dollars to come out, do a workshop, to do a seminar, but I'm reinvesting 100% of that money.
Let me just, as we wrap up here, I just wanted
Mhm.
to put this in a more global perspective, because obviously there were people abusing people of all colors long before America was founded.
Sure.
And what do you think is unique about the American situation, if anything? Because I've often said to people, people who will say, well, blacks have a higher crime rate than other groups and whatnot, and poverty
Mhm.
and bad. But if you look around in any society, the people who are at the bottom of the society, for whatever reasons, if you don't have money, you're going to have higher crime rates, you're going to have worse health. Do you think that there's something unique pathologically about America, not necessarily exceptionally unique, but just different than, say, the way the Chinese might oppress a minority group in their country, or the way that Laplanders are treated in Finland, say?
Hmm. Sure, Aboriginals in Australia. I mean,
Yeah.
you have all of these examples of this piece being global. It goes back multiple generations. It's not new. We're not the first people walking this earth to see this and feel this and experience. I think that, that we look at the philosopher who wrote The World is Will and Idea, where it says people fear what they can't understand and they hate what they can't conquer and dominate. There's a legitimate fear of, well, why haven't they snapped and thrown us all off the end of the world? Why haven't, why? But again, it's a global piece, which explains the global oppression. I don't think that that's right, but I think that's the way it is. But I don't see that as the way it's going to be in the future. I'm dumb enough to be an optimist. I really see that change is going to have to come because we can't sustain it at the level that it's at. I want to make sure that people understand that if there's more um, pathology in particular communities, there's almost always a reason. You know, Through our actions and inactions, we've created oppressed people all over the world. The MS-13 isn't an accident. We pretty much set them up as a starter kit. The real fear is that it's not bigger than it is. You know, if you see pathological behavior in African American communities, I think we can go. Let's start the list, and we can just go murder for murder, and you name the black guy that did it, and I'll name the white guy that did it, and I think you're going to run out before I do. So
So just to be clear,
statistically,
Derek, just to be
mhm.
clear, you would put then the American situation of white racial paranoia, pathology, whatever, within the general continuum of human oppression of other humans. Then,
That's where the solution is going to have to come from. We can't fix this without fixing the pieces that it's connected to. You know,
okay.
if you're fixing your car, you can't fix the water pump, and the pieces on either side of the water pump are broken.
Yeah.
We got to take the whole engine out
Okay. Well,
at a certain point.
for people who want to find out more, DerrickPayneOnline.com is the LMJ website home. Let me just give you a minute or two if you want to say anything else that I may have neglected, Derrick, and thank you for appearing.
Oh no, Dan, thank you. Call me anytime, Skype me. Let me know how I can help because these conversations help me. If nothing else, I'm rehearsing what I need to articulate to a larger group of people in the future one day. I thank you for your time and energy. I thank you for everybody that stuck with this whole interview from beginning to end. I am accessible. Derrick Payne at yahoo.com is a great way to reach me. Reach out on Twitter and say, hey, I saw your interview with Dan and I'd like to know more. And let's sit down and have a conversation. Not at a Waffle House or a Starbucks, but let's sit down and have a conversation about which direction this thing can go in. I can't do this by myself. I need everybody that's watching right now on my side and on my team. So, Dan, thank you for the work you're doing. God bless you and your family and the direction you're pushing this in. And but not for you, I'd be sitting around somewhere mad about the way it's going right now. And keep your focus. Stick with me. You can find me on Twitter. Like I said, email me and let's keep the dialogue going. They want us to shut up. Let's not do that. Be good to yourself and let's be good to each other. Peace and love.